Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. It's Wednesday, and you already know what time it is. In a few moments, you'll get to hear my thoughts and feelings on episode 10 of Married at First Sight Boston. So first things first, if you haven't seen this episode yet, then don't rush to see it. It's mostly filler, meaning that they're killing a lot of time, and some of the same issues that these couples have had over the past 5 episodes are also present in this episode. And truth be told, this episode could have been shortened to 1 hour long, and it would have had the same impact. So for the purposes of the review, in 10 minutes or less, I'll give a brief recap of the episode, as well as my opinion on the issues that each couple faced, and lastly, I'll give my overall rating for the episode. So without any further delay, let's jump right in. First, let's talk about Lindsey and Mark. We first see Lindsey meeting with a friend via virtual chat, and during this meeting, we learn that prior to that particular day, Lindsey and Mark haven't had sex for the past 2 weeks. But according to Lindsey, earlier in that day, Mark tried to give Lindsey that good old pickle tickle. But the experience was over quicker than Bad Boy could drop an act from its label. Lindsey goes on to tell her friend that Mark doesn't fulfill her sexual needs, nor does he try to develop an intimate connection with her. And as much as I hate to admit it, Lindsey has a point with her frustrations. Throughout this season, Mark hasn't been the best when it comes to communicating. And one thing that I noticed about Lindsey is that she tends to hone in on words that somebody says. So if somebody misspeaks or they have trouble expressing themselves, then Lindsey is already analyzing the message and thinking the worst before somebody like Mark has a chance to say what they actually mean. But later on in the episode, Dr. Viv comes to visit. And during this visit, Lindsey reveals that her sex life with Mark is dead. Now, Dr. Viv tries to get to the bottom of why Lindsey feels this way, but Lindsey is extremely disrespectful towards Mark and his ability to please her in the bedroom. Lindsey claims that she's too much for Mark to handle and that he doesn't please her sexually. So Dr. Viv tries to check her on that, but truly checking Lindsey is never an easy task. Later on in the episode, Mark and Lindsey get some sexual gag gifts, and they have a lot of fun using the gifts on one another. So let's move on to Katina and Elijahuan. In their first scene for the episode, Dr. Viv comes to visit them, and this is less than a day from the blow-up that happened on the last episode. Once Dr. Viv arrives, she wastes no time addressing the elephant in the room, which is Elijahuan's obsession with having a wife that can cook and clean. Elijahuan spends a lot of time trying to explain his position to Dr. Viv, but to no avail. One thing that finally hit home with me about Elijahuan is that he's pretty horrible when it comes to explaining his point of view in a clear and concise manner. And when you couple that with the intense energy that he gives off when trying to explain himself to Katina, it creates a recipe for disaster. We then see Katina crying because of how Elijahuan's words made her feel, and in my opinion, this would have been the golden opportunity for Elijahuan to console Katina, apologize to her for how he spoke to her last episode, and assure her that he will do right by her going forward. But he doesn't do any of those things. Instead, Elijahuan acknowledges that he heard Katina's concerns and that he needs to work on his tone. So with the help of Dr. Viv, we finally get to the meat and potatoes of why Elijahuan has the issues with Katina. And we learn that Elijahuan feels that he's giving his best in the marriage, but that she's not giving her best or effectively communicating with him. And in my opinion, if this is how Elijahuan truly feels, then he can definitely convey this message to Katina in a respectful and effective manner, and I think she'll be very receptive to it. But when Dr. Viv leaves, Katina surprises Elijahuan with a movie night at the house, and Elijahuan seems very receptive and appreciative of it. I noticed that Katina is definitely a people pleaser, and it would be nice to see Elijahuan return the favor and the energy. I think that if somebody like Michael were married to Katina, he would be in a much happier place. But towards the end of the episode, we see Katina and Elijahuan loosening up, and it looks like Elijahuan is in a place where he might be giving Katina that good old tallywhacker smacker action. So let's move on to Jasmina and Michael. In the beginning of the episode, Michael and Jasmina spend time talking about ways they can improve themselves, within the scope of their marriage of course. They also talked about their most embarrassing moments, and which part of the body they found most attractive about their partner. Pretty much a lot of filler. But then we get a visit from Dr. Viv, and she talks to Michael and Jasmina about the topic of intimacy. This is when Jasmina shares that she needs an emotional connection before she can give her body to a man, and if that connection isn't there, then her vajayjay is not getting wet for anybody. So no, Jasmina was not directly speaking about Michael when we saw this in the previews for last episode, but it still feels like she's hinting that Michael isn't doing it for her. During Dr. Viv's visit, Michael shares that he isn't comfortable speaking to Jasmina because he fears that she will wrongfully label him as aggressive again. And I can tell all the women out there that as a black man, once you're labeled as aggressive and dangerous, regardless of whether it's true or not, it's hard to shake off that label. But as Michael is trying to explain his issues with Jasmina, we clearly see that Jasmina is cutting him off several times, and there's no debate about it. And when Michael tries to get Jasmina to take accountability for her issues, Jasmina is dodging accountability as if it's a bill collector. As Dr. Viv leaves this madness, there's one thing that I took away from their scenes, and that is that Michael has a snowball's chance in hell of being intimate with Jasmina without stimulating her mind first, which won't happen because Jasmina is too confrontational to get Michael to want to chase her. All in all, Jasmina is too busy being disrespectful towards Michael and not wanting to be open to taking accountability for her issues. And at this point, I think the best course of action is for Jasmina and Michael to get a divorce because there's really nothing there for either of them. Lastly, let's talk about Steve and Noi. When Dr. Viv comes to visit them, we learn in a roundabout way that Steve and Noi have been getting it in like two jackrabbits trapped in a tube sock. But then they also spend a great deal of time talking about their problems throughout their experience on the show. The topic of finances comes up, and Noi essentially lets Steve know that it doesn't matter what his finances look like. She doesn't envision being married to a stay-at-home dad. Now, without any context, I will completely understand where Noi is coming from and fully support her stance on the matter. But this is a unique situation. Steve likely has all his finances in order, and he doesn't have any issues making money. Also, as Steve pointed out, he's been doing most of the cooking and cleaning since they've been married, and if he got a full-time job, he doesn't know how Noi would be able to adjust to it because he's never seen her have to cook or clean on a consistent basis. So as usual, Steve makes very logical and sound points when talking about his concerns with Noi, but Noi tends to be stuck in how she feels about a certain person or thing. So towards the last 30 minutes of the episode, the men meet up for a game of ice hockey, and the women meet up for a session of aerial yoga. One interesting takeaway that I got from this part of the episode is Michael and Jasmina's response to the question, how would you rate your marriage? Michael rates his marriage to Jasmina a 7 out of 10, and my initial reaction was complete shock, because either Michael is completely lying to these guys just to save face, or his past relationships have been so awful that he sees a glimmer of hope with Jasmina. But when Jasmina was asked the same question, she refrains from even giving an answer, which says a lot because anyone who watches the show knows Jasmina is not feeling Michael at all. But speaking of ratings, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll give this episode a 4. Between all of the filler, the focus on unresolved issues, and the silliness with the sex toys and outfits for the episode, I wasn't very impressed with what I saw. But judging by the previews for next episode, the level of foolishness is only going to get worse. So this marks the end of my review. Please feel free to leave any comments about the episode or my review in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to reply to each and every comment. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.